Chapter 12. Being a staff writer at SNL was the most fun I'll ever have in my life. I was 22 when I got hired at SNL. My first show was Steve Carell as a host and Kanye West as a musical guest. As far as first shows go, that's a pretty outstanding lineup, especially since the previous season had featured host Paris Hilton and musical guest Ashley Simpson, who got caught lip-syncing and just, walked off the stage. Kanye would also walk up the stage, but that was just at dress rehearsal when he got into a screaming match with our 95-year-old lighting designer. I'm guessing Kanye was right. I still love Kanye despite all of his, everything. There's no ramping up when you started our show. My first day of work was pitching sketch ideas to Steve Carell in front of Lauren, the entire cast, and all the other writers. You very quickly have to convince yourself that this is normal in order to survive. This has been a theme throughout my life. Pretend I belong somewhere until eventually I do. It didn't help that the walls at SNL are covered with photos from some of the best sketches in the show's history. So while I wrote a terrible scene about a cocky gas station attendant, I had to look up and see a framed portrait of Chevy Chase as the land shark. It's like if you were an artist and you had to paint inside the Museum of Modern Art. Halfway through painting the haystack, you'd look up and think, damn it, I think Monet's might be better. Of course, when you're starting out, you're not trying to write a great sketch. You're just hoping to get something funny on TV and not get fired. My first week, I pitched an idea about a real news story where a JetBlue plane had to make an emergency landing and the passengers were watching coverage of their own plane crash on the JetBlue TV screens. Luckily, the plane landed safely. People around the office seemed to like the idea, so I wrote it with Bill Hader and Eric Kenward, and somehow the sketch made it onto the show. Not only that, it was the first sketch after the monologue. So I'd written the first sketch of my first show at SNL, which I didn't realize at the time is extremely rare. In fact, in the 15 years I've written at the show, I've only had the first sketch after the monologue a handful of times. Liz Kukowski, one of the senior writers, warned me, don't let it go to your head. Last year, a new writer got 2 sketches on this first show, and by the end of the year, he was fired. I thought, Jesus, was he putting cameras in the women's bathroom? I took Liz's advice to heart and completely let go of any joy I derived from my first sketch. It's a puritanical pattern I would follow for the rest of my career at SNL. If I had a great week, I would enjoy it on Sunday, then forget about it by Monday. And if I had a bad week, I would fall asleep on a pizza on Sunday, then forget about it by Monday. To this day, I've never rewatched an episode. It might not be the healthiest approach emotionally, but you need that mentality to survive the extreme highs and lows of an SNL season. It's so rare that you experience unbridled success where your sketch goes well and there isn't a technical problem or a flubbed line or a joke you wished you had changed or a note that you forgot to tell a performer. You have to stay level-headed because it's a long season and it's a live show, so a lot of elements are out of your control. For example, when Bruce Willis walked out halfway through a sketch because he thought the sketch was over, and then, it was just over. Because he couldn't walk back in and say, oh, wait, guys, there's more sketch. That doesn't mean I'm always calm and even-keeled, mind you. There have been many, many nights when I opened a Word document and wrote, I fucking hate this place. I'm quitting after the season. Clearly no one wants me here or likes anything I write. I'm moving to Puerto Rico and writing my fantasy novel. For some reason, all my empty threats end with me moving to Puerto Rico and writing a fantasy novel. That'll show him. But even when I was angry or felt like I sucked and couldn't get a sketch on the show, I was still deeply grateful to work at SNL. It's not for everyone, and there are clearly funny people who fail at it and then go on to tremendous success. See Larry David. But it's an incredible opportunity, and whether you flourish or explode in flames, you leave there a tougher, more capable comedian. It was an opportunity I never took for granted. Even in my first season writing, agents would come to the after party and ask, do you want to be on the show someday? Like, writing's cute and all, but do you want to be someone who I actually care about talking to? In truth, when I got hired to be a writer, writing was all I thought about. There's plenty to worry about without also angling to be in the cast. Also, I loved writing for other people. I still do. It's liberating to write in other people's voices. It's inspiring to see great actors elevate your material in ways you couldn't imagine. Clearly, there are things Kenan Thompson or Kate McKinnon or Leslie Jones, especially Leslie, can do that I will never be able to do. And to write a character or even a joke that they score with still gives me a huge rush. Plus, you get to write for a different host every week, including people I grew up idolizing, like Jim Carrey, Will Ferrell, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and Adam Sandler. People you want to impress and write something great for. All the senior writers and cast members looked out for us, too. Seth Meyers would help me rewrite any stupid sketch I brought him, which I appreciate even more now that I understand how little free time a head writer has. Andrew Steele, Emily Spivey, and T. Sean Shannon would encourage me to keep writing in my own voice even after one of my weirder sketches bombed at the table. Eric Kenward and Matt Murray would make every sketch I wrote funnier and make sure I wasn't depressed when I went 4 shows in a row with nothing on the air. Paula Pell would pitch me a joke that ended up being the biggest laugh in the piece, just because she liked making other people's sketches better. And Amy Poehler would say, "Hey, Jost, want to write something together?" Which was a very kind gesture from a senior cast member to a brand new writer. I would then sit there and type while Amy improvised way funnier lines than I could ever come up with. I started collaborating with Rob Klein, John Solomon, and Kent Sublette, who have each written some of the best sketches of the past decade and made anything we wrote together 10 times funnier. And I had the wisdom, guidance, and occasional Irish fury of our producer Aaron Doyle, who fought for me with Lauren but also called me out when I was, to quote the NBA on TNT, shacked in a fool. And I was lucky that a bunch of really funny writers came in over the next few years, like John Mulaney, Simon Rich, Marika Sawyer, Zach Cannon, Sarah Schneider, and Chris Kelly, because they were immediately writing great sketches, and it made me think, oh shit, I need to keep getting better at this job and keep reinventing how I write. Plus, we had insanely talented performers who were writing at the show, like Tim Robinson, Mike O'Brien, Jillian Bell, Hannibal Buress, and J.B. Smoove. So I was surrounded by really funny people all the time. And what you realize years later is that so much of your career is driven by your peers. Lauren always says, you never want to be the smartest person in the room, because you always want to challenge yourself and try to get to the level of the people you admire. I was fortunate enough to be around a lot of people who I still admire and still want to catch up to. SNL is probably the least routine job in the world. Monday is the pitch meeting, where you have to make your coworkers and ideally the host laugh. Tuesday, you're writing all day and night. Wednesday is the table read, followed by meetings with all the heads of production, if your sketch got picked, and heavy drinking, regardless of whether your sketch got picked. Thursday, you're at a rewrite table with the other writers, pitching jokes, and eating a pound of candy and donuts to relieve your hangover. Friday, you're either rehearsing in the studio or filming a pre-taped piece on location somewhere. And then Saturday is the show, followed by 2 parties. What other job in America has 2 parties at the end of every work week? That's a lot of variety, even for a variety show. And that's why I haven't gotten bored, even after 15 seasons of writing. For my first few years at the show, I essentially lived at work and actually slept there 1 or 2 nights every week because there was nowhere else I wanted to be. I owned 2 pair of jeans, 10 t-shirts, and 3 pairs of New Balance sneakers. My only expenses were $1,000 a month in rent. I had 2 roommates for my first 5 years at the show. Our hours did not line up well. $1,000 in rent, which in New York was somehow a steal, and $80 for a monthly Subway card. The train, not the sandwiches, though I did eat at Subway 4 or 5 times a week. The rest I save in case I got fired or sued by a celebrity for defaming them in a sketch. I got a Prism Award for a sketch about a steroid use in baseball, but I'm guessing Barry Bonds did not love it. More than anything, I wrote as much as I physically could. I'd submit 5 or 6 sketches every week in hopes of developing as quickly as possible. In terms of page count, I was writing the equivalent of half a screenplay every Tuesday night. And even though 90% of what I wrote never made the show, I could look back at the end of the year and see that I was improving, and that I had destroyed half a forest with the number of scripts I printed out. But I wasn't just developing my skills as a writer. I was developing a knowledge and an awareness of every single element of show business. Because at SNL, unlike at most shows, the writer is also the producer for any sketches that get picked. For better or worse, the ultimate decision on staging, costumes, hair, set design, and special effects rests with the writer. Now, that doesn't mean the writer has any clue how those things actually work. It just means you have to communicate your vision for the sketch to all the different department heads, who are all exceptional at what they do. And then you have to have a real conversation about how and if that vision is achievable in a matter of 48 hours. Because eventually, when you're watching the sketch at dress rehearsal next to Lorne, you are the one he'll turn to and say, "What the hell is going on with Awkwafina's wig?" And it's not because Jody Mancuso, head of our hair department, made a bad wig. If you've ever seen SNL, you know the wigs are maybe the most impressive part. It's because you, the writer, asked her to make the wig look insane. If I've learned one thing at this job, it's to never ask for a wig that's quote-unquote insane. My favorite wig-related story at our show involves a host who was bald but wore a toupee. Rather than admit he was wearing a toupee, he had the hair department put a bald cap over his toupee and then a wig over the bald cap. So the layers were his own bald head, then fake hair, then a fake bald head, then more fake hair. I'm sweating just imagining how hot his scalp must have been. I got 8 sketches on the show my first year, including one cold open and a parody of MTV's My Super Sweet 16, starring first-time host Scarlett Johansson. She had just turned 20 and I was 23, but in terms of status and maturity, she was here, holds hand above head, and I was here, holds hand 1 inch off ground. She claims that she remembers thinking I was cute, but I know what I looked like, and that's not the word I would have used. Shaggy would have been generous, slovenly, more accurate. I remember her being beautiful, smart, sweet, and intimidatingly sophisticated. And she had a grace and a smile that I've still never seen in any other human. The only line I remember from that sketch is when Scarlett's bratty character said, "This party is literally worse than the Holocaust." That was my Shakespearean sonnet for the woman I would one day fall in love with. It was a memorable season for a host, and not because I would end up dating one of them, Antonio Banderas. These were the pairings of hosts and musical guest. The aforementioned Steve Carell and Kanye West, Jack Black and Neil Young, Lindsay Lohan and Pearl Jam, Steve Martin and Prince, and maybe my favorite show of the year, Tom Hanks and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. That was everything I grew up loving in one show. Plus, the Red Hot Chili Peppers played Give It Away for their second song because they were supposed to play it the first time they appeared on SNL in 1993, but the show ran out of time and it got cut. 1993's loss was 2005's gain. And like in any season of SNL, there were some very odd combinations too, such as John Heder and Ashley Simpson, again, Eva Longoria and Korn, Matt Dillon and Arctic Monkeys, and of course the classic duo of Kevin Spacey and Nelly Furtado. That's one of the underrated aspects of the show to me, how it becomes a strange time capsule of fame at that moment in time. Every year has some real home runs and some real question marks. Just like each episode has, hopefully, a home run or two, and then maybe a double, a couple singles, and one or two times when the batter lets go of the bat and it flies into the stands and hits a kid. There are still giant old VHS tapes outside Lauren's office with labels of the host and musical guests from the 80s and 90s, and it's like joke combinations you would see on a Family Guy parody of SNL. Charlton Heston and Wynton Marsalis, John Larroquette and Timbuk 3, Sylvester Stallone and Jamiroquai, Jackie Chan and Kid Rock, and my favorite combo of all time, Charles Barkley and Nirvana. When Barkley came back to host years later, he said he had no idea who Nirvana was at the time. He was backstage listening to them rehearse, and he turned to our producer and said, "Are those guys saying rape me? Because it sounds like they're saying rape me." And that's pretty much SNL in a nutshell. One of the greatest basketball players in history asking why one of the best bands in history was saying rape me. Why would I want to work anywhere else?